I didn't have the chat open even, Megan, so I didn't see your message. I'm just like, we're just continuing on. You can always feel free to cut in, Megan. Okay. So Megan, can you tell if we are live?
Yes, I think we are good to go now.
Okay. Okay, so now we're really live with week 3 of Know It and Grow It. And I am here with Keven Porter and Charmaine LaFortune. And in our first 2 weeks, our first week, we were talking about kind of fast tips for getting started growing. And last week, we talked about different types of growing systems, using raised beds, using lasagna beds, earth boxes. We're going to return on another future session to talk about growing in containers. We also talked last week about what types of things to be planting at this time of year. And those sessions are available on YouTube or on Facebook if you want to catch up to where we're at right now. But this week, I'm going to bring up what we're talking about this week. Here's my little preview here. Oops. We're going to be oh no. We're going to be talking about soil, digging into soil. We're going to be looking at the different components of soil and sort of what makes a really healthy soil. And then we're going to be sprinkling it with some living water, talking about what we need to do to be sure that we're watering our gardens well. And then, of course, we're going to have our Q&A, which is kind of the most important part, where you guys can ask questions of these knowledgeable gardeners. But since each week we want to make sure that we get to learn a little bit more about the gardeners that we're learning from, I'm going to ask Charmaine to talk for a couple minutes about her garden, the Giving 110 garden. And there we go. All right.
Hi, everyone. My name is Charmaine LaFortune, and I'm the founder of the Giving 110 Community Garden, which is located at 750 South 20th Street in Newark, New Jersey. Our garden is situated on property that we've adopted from the city of Newark. And also it's been an established for the last 4 years. We've been growing food for the last 3 years. The things that we grow, herbs, greens, cucumbers, peppers, a variety of plants that I grew up with, like bitter melon, eggplant, that I consider a favorite. We also have activities for kids through the year. We do yoga, we do paint workshops. We also plan on doing some tie-dye sessions this year. And we also have volunteer sessions where we like plant and grow. So we explain soil, the soil content, minerals, and how long it takes for vegetables to grow. We recently partnered with the American Heart Association, where we're teaching kids, actually donating grow bags and seedlings kids so that they can also grow their own food while they're home. And there are containers and grow bags and small pots. So if you're interested, reach me on Instagram at giving110_garden. Thank you.
Actually, Charmaine, this is so good because we learn things even about each other each week. I didn't know you were working on that, and I want to contact you about that project. I am also involved in a project in the Fairmount Heights neighborhood that they're going to start trying to do exactly what you're already doing. So I'd love to learn from how that's working out, using grow bags and helping people who probably haven't grown before get started growing, especially young people.
Yes, that's really important.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think this is the perfect time. Kids have not been in school. Most of them don't have meaningful, summer programs going on. So giving them something, useful, important, and educational to do is terrific. So that's great that you're able to do that. Okay, so we were going to jump in. We were going to talk about what is soil, and I think Keven, you were gonna start leading that. So you want to be, do you want to use these slides, or do you want center screen? It's up to you.
I'd rather not use the slides.
Okay, so we'll go straight to you.
Okay. Okay. Are we here?
Yeah.
Okay. Soil. What is soil? Soil is it's life. It's a bunch of living organisms. In soil, you have sand, you have humus, you have rock that has been broken down into fine particles, and there is water, there's moisture, and there are living creatures in there. Some small that you can't see, and some you can see. It's so much like if you were to go take up a handful of soil, like almost like a billion forms of life in your hands. And this is what helps us grow our fruits and veggies. It takes life to give life. And so when looking or buying soil, you have to feel it. You have to touch it and smell it. And you'll know it's good by just doing that. But one of the drawbacks to purchasing soil is when you're buying a large quantity of soil, I'm talking about 5, 10, 20 yards of soil and up, a lot of times you may not have the opportunity to go and stick your hand in. And sometimes you just have to go by word of mouth or what the vendor is telling you about the soil. And a lot of times I find that not to be true, and what I find out when buying soil, the reality, if I go to a Home Depot or a garden center and get a bag of soil, I get a good quality of soil 100% of the time, 100%. But I'm paying like top dollar for that soil. If I need 10, 20 yards of soil, I'm gonna pay anywhere from $335 to $370. I pay for like 10 yards of soil, and it's a surprise. I ask for different mixes, and then I get this. I said, but I would say this. When purchasing soil in large quantities, be prepared to add in more nutrients. It's rare that you'll get something that you can actually plant it. If you want something for potting soil, you can go to the local garden center, get a couple of bags. It'll probably, you're paying like $7.50 or $8 for a bag of organic soil, and you're getting a good quality, and it's organic, But when you purchase in large quantities, again, unless you go out there and see it, then you really don't know what you're getting. And my take on everything that you buy in that size, you have to amend it. You have to add stuff to it, be it peat moss, be it manure, mushroom compost. You have to add something to it. Even if you order it and they say it's some compost mix in it, you still have to add something. And that's what I see. Charmaine,
Yeah.
I hope you'd like to add to that.
Yes, I did. You do need to add a lot of stuff in there because I've purchased topsoil before, and this soil was the greatest quality of soil, and I got it, and it was so dead. I don't know if you know what dead soil is. Nothing was growing at all. I had so many amendments between the manure, the vermiculite, the peat moss to keep, reviving the soil. So we really didn't have a harvest that year because of that, because we had to keep working on that soil. It was horrible. That was the first and last time I got that soil.
How's your soil now?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I got really good compost soil this year, and I bought new mushroom soil also, so it's much better.
And that's what I like to say. If you, even with the bag soil, that's not the route to go. If you're doing, let's say 20 by 20 feet, no, you don't want to do anything. And I'm talking about backyard space. You don't want to go to the store. You need to get a less expensive way. And you want to be able to always generate your own soil. Because if you're a farmer and you can't generate soil after years of doing your farming, then you're spending too much money. The money that you're putting out, the money that you're creating, if you're generating any money, or the money that you're saving by growing your own veggies, you're just spending too much money. Just go buy organic from the supermarket. But what I like to say, it takes at least 3 to 5 years to get your soil in a good condition. So don't be frustrated if you're buying in bulk 5 yards of soil and you're amending and things aren't looking like they should. It's going to take time. And you're very fortunate if you happen to get some good soil in bulk and it's coming up, but from what I've seen, it doesn't happen. You have to work on it. And that's a couple of years, really a couple of years. So be patient.
Keven or Charmaine, I have a quick question for you because I am sure that there are people listening who have a hard time quantifying or knowing what you mean when you say a yard of soil, and people might hear that term a lot. Can you help us understand what that quantity is?
So a yard of soil, the last time I purchased it, they equated to like the big bags that you will get from Home Depot. It's like 8 bags of those combined together is a yard of soil. So it's like they take 2 CU on the bag.
Mm-hmm.
So 8 of those will equate to 1 yard of soil. So, or you take a what do you call it? A lift?
Like a loader?
A loader, yes.
Yeah.
A loader is a yard of soil.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when they talk about a yard, though, they're talking about like a measurement that would be like, well, this is bigger than this, right? But 1 yard, like 3 feet by, if you picture a box, it's like 3 feet tall and 3 feet wide and 3 feet deep, right? A big giant box,
Mhm.
like maybe you would have a giant old-fashioned TV in, not a flat screen TV, that could hold a yard.
Yes.
And that's how typically when you buy bulk soil, that's how they sell it. And just for people who are listening, let's throw out some prices for them so they can have an idea. Anywhere from like what? Maybe if you got it really cheap for $18 up to $30-something to $40.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mushroom soil, I paid $38 a yard. You can also
Yeah.
topsoil for about 23. It depends, but it comes out so much more economical when you buy it in bulk, especially if you have a garden or you have like multiple beds. So it does come out much more economical if you buy it in bulk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so I need to look back at our topics here really quick. Let's see. So Keven, I at some point maybe I'll show my, this one I think we need to share. I think this is helpful to share. I'm gonna let's see, go back to go back to where we are, just so we could share this, because I think what's tricky too, for people when they're talking about growing like in raised beds, or in containers, or even just growing kind of above ground, which is, or with introduced, you could say it's like engineered soil, right, that you're creating or bringing in, Kevin, is it's different than like, you know, kind of large scale farming where they're not really probably doing that much changing of the soil. And so just to share an image of what soil, like, because it's also important to know what healthy soil really looks like, is that because our soil is precious all over the place, right? Not just in our gardens, but it is a natural resource that people need to think about preserving. And that it, as you said, yeah, right, like the parent material of it all is rock, but that real soil has layers, right? It has all of these layers because it's the Earth's surface is made up of weathered material that's taken thousands of years to develop. And then we're often talking just about this top layer, right? The organic matter and the surface soil when we talk about topsoil. And that's primarily what we're concerned with when we're growing a garden. But for like a healthy ecosystem, you have to have all of this stuff, right? You have to have all of those layers. And the other thing, I think that was really cool that you said, Kevin, I just want to show, if I can here, having trouble navigating these things, is that that soil has a lot of air and water in it naturally. Like, I think people they think of it as solid ground, right? But we all know that for plants to live and be healthy, there's got to be air and water in the soil, right? There's got to be a lot of that open space. So when you were talking about, Charmaine, about using like vermiculite, or were you mentioning that you adding vermiculite to your beds?
Yes, I had vermiculite for aeration and retention of water.
Right. So that like helps to maintain that space, because if it was just all solid stuff, there would be no place for the plant's roots to grow and for the soil to actually hold water, right? Let's see. I want to make sure that we talk about the different things. So, Charmaine, you were going to talk a little bit about soil nutrients. Do you want a slide to show that, Charmaine, or you want me to spotlight you? You're there?
Yes, I need to unmute myself, sorry. So soil is based, actually nutrients that I use in the garden is primarily organic. And I use a lot of blood meal and also bone meal. And some of the, like the second year that I planted the garden, one of my friends who had a garden also, her brother used to go fishing. And when they got the fish and all the bones, she will bring it and we will dig a huge hole around the perennials and bury it. And those were the best years of those perennials. The flowering was amazing. So the primary minerals that plants need are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And the nitrogen actually helps build the cells of the plant and encourages green pigmentation because of the chlorophyll process. And it also creates carbohydrates from the light once the plant is in the garden. So, and the fish fertilizer that we use, it's you can get it from Walmart. It's really reasonable. It's really good, especially when you're starting seedlings. It will build the root growth of the plant, make it stronger. And also it's very organic. It wouldn't burn the plant. Some synthetic fertilizers, once you use them, it tends to burn the plant, and you will actually have dead seedlings or burn seedlings that cannot be revive over time. Also, phosphorus helps with the energy of the plant. It helps transfer the plant from one stage to the other. And in the growing process, it helps to increase the roots and also the fruit of the plant. And the potassium helps with the flowering. So, you know, there are other minerals that you could also add to your soil. We use calcium. I use eggshells. Some people use other forms of calcium, but I primarily grind up my eggshells and I pulverize it and I add it to the beds at the beginning of the season. So it breaks down slowly. And also I use Epsom salt as magnesium, which is really good for root growth and also, you know, healthy, strong stems.
Can I ask you, do either of you guys ever use lime, like dolomitic limestone in your beds or in your garden?
Yeah, we
No?
have used it. Yeah, lime. But I can't really say if it helped or was benefit, but what we use more is either like fish heads, like we go to the fish market and just ask them because they throw them away. And then what I usually do, like now, I start my fall compost, and I have 2 containers. It could be a little labor intensive. I don't think it is. It's something to do. But I have a garbage can, 2 garbage cans, and I put my leaves and stuff in there. Mix the fish head, some sand, some mushroom, a little bit of everything, and then there with the fish, and I stir it up. I put, like, if it's 90-degree day, like it has been a couple of days, I throw it out on the black top. I let it sit there in the sun, and then I scoop it up, stir it around, and put it back in there after a couple of hours. So then by October, September, I have some good compost that I can just sprinkle around.
That's serious.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, so that's what I do, and it's not that bad. It
So
works. It works for us.
Do you pulverize the fish heads?
No, actually, I layer it. Soil, leaves, fish head, soil, leaves, fish head to the top, and actually and I stop at a certain point. Once it's full, I stop. And I keep a lid on it so it's hot. And by October, you won't see no fish heads or anything. It's all just black and brown matter. Yeah.
Are you really popular in your neighborhood, Kevin, with the
Well, yeah. Sometimes when I first start, yeah, it can be a little bit, but after a couple of days, not even a week, after a couple of days, it's okay. And then our food scraps, since we're vegetarian, our food scraps, I put them in little by little, like watermelon, papaya I just added, and plantains. I just add them to it in the sun, and they dry up real quick on a day like today. They dry up real quick. You know, so I don't get like a soupy compost. It's kind of dry, something I can sprinkle or mix in with other stuff.
Somebody was just asking about using banana peels. Does anybody use banana peels? And if so, what's the best way to use them? Yeah.
Yes, I do.
What's the best way for banana peels?
Well, I would say if you have a small garden, and I see my mother-in-law do this, and this is from her Dominican culture, she takes banana peels when they use them because they don't have a lot of they're not vegetarians. So she takes the banana peel and just lays it there on top of the bed. She'll have a bed, she'll lay the banana peel, she'll lay the other vegetables, she'll sprinkle them around like that raw. But she's in Florida, and in that hot sun, that stuff shrivels up and decomposes quickly. But I think I know a few gardeners here that do the same thing. They just put their banana peels. I wouldn't do it because, I think my neighbors may be more concerned about that than the smell of the stuff composted.
Right.
For me, I just added to the beds. Before, like I said, I used to do in bed composting. But
Yeah.
now that I have the composter and it's a hot composter, I just throw all my food scraps in there, add the brown material, the leaves. I shred all my mail without the plastic, and I add it in there so that we have some brown matter so that it doesn't get too wet. And I just keep stirring it, turning it over, and that helps.
Yeah, I have found that my stuff breaks down really fast in the summertime, but I add to my compost all year long. I don't know. Do you kind of build your compost during the wintertime also?
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of times I will, in the winter time, what I'll do, I'll go to Starbucks, because they have a program called Grounds for the Grounds. So at the end of the day, usually the manager will say, okay, pick it up at such and such a time. And they'll have a bundle of all of the coffee grounds that they had, spent coffee grounds. And it's pretty rich. So I store that up over the winter, and then in the summertime, like some of that's in my mix now that I'm doing now. And then I sprinkle it around. If I have it and it's not too cold, I will sprinkle it around anyway and let the snow or the rain wash it into the ground.
Yeah, yeah. So
that's the same thing I do.
Sorry, go. Yeah, you do the same thing, Charmaine?
Yeah, actually, one of the other gardeners, his name is Emilio. He has Java compost.
Yes.
And they donated like 7 tubs of ground coffee for me. So I had like one of those barrels full with ground coffee that I sprinkled around the whole garden. I put in the compost bin, so that and the worms loves it. There's so much worms.
They do. They do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really great, having all that organic material to add naturally.
And composting, it's kind of fun once you really get into it, because it gets your mind to thinking. So many cardboard boxes that people throw out that it doesn't have to hit the street. You can pull the tape off and just wet the cardboard, throw it in your cardboard mix. Even if you tear it up, it will decompose pretty quickly after it's in there. But the compost has to be somewhat moist for that to break down. But yeah, we look for cardboard boxes, and a lot of them that had ink on it, like you said, well, it's colored. And I was told that most of the ink that they use nowadays is organic, and it won't affect the soil. So you might want to do your research in that, but that's what we do. We just cardboard it, and put it in either in the ground or in our compost box.
Yeah. Oops. Sorry. I think I'm. Okay. Am I echoing?
Yes, you are. Am I echoing?
No.
Yeah. So with compost, once people find your composting, once people find you composting, like outside our farm, we found a box of apples, just rotten apples, boxes of peaches someday. And what I would do if I got a box of peaches or a box of apples, I would just dig a hole in the ground, throw it in there, and then cover it back up with the soil and wood chip, because it's too much for me to add to the compost. That's too wet. So I would put it in the ground and cover it up. And actually, by next year, when I go back to that spot, you'll never know an apple was there. And it doesn't smell.
That's great. That's really helpful. Yeah, I think it's interesting when you're talking about the coffee grounds, which this is one thing I never knew. We talk about in composting, you want to have a mix of green material and greens and browns, right? So the greens are like nitrogen rich things, fresh things. and browns are carbon-rich things like paper and cardboard. But coffee grounds, even though they are brown in color, they are actually on the green side. They're considered
loaded with nitrogen.
more nitrogen rich. So I learned that recently. I thought that was interesting to bring up. And I think all of that stuff, it's just good to think about, that all of that process of things breaking down is happening naturally out in the world, and would be happening with our waste if we didn't incinerate it or put it into landfills. And whenever anybody is able to compost, even on a small scale at home, they're doing a huge service to the earth, because they're keeping that material in the ground where it should be, right? Rather than putting it up in our atmosphere when we're putting waste into landfills. It creates a huge amount of greenhouse gases that, is part of what's destroying our earth. So,
Yes.
Everybody can just do a little tiny piece, even if they're not gardeners, they can do a
Yeah.
little piece.
Yeah.
Or if you know a garden, compost and set up a time you drop it off.
Exactly.
We've had that, like our brother-in-law around the corner. We get like 2 7-gallon buckets of compost from their family at least once a month. So it works.
So and there was you mentioned, Kevin, I just want to make sure we answered. Jerry was asking, is the ink on mail or on printed on things a concern when putting it into your compost? And I agree with what you're saying. From what I've heard, most ink used in commercial things is soy-based ink now. It's basically not a concern about using that. I mean, some things, when you use like a shiny, like magazine kind of paper,
a lot
of clay coating, and that's not going to break down very well but
so with composting, from what we've heard, most of the ink is organic, but still, you want to be careful with the amount you add. I wouldn't add a lot of cardboard. I wouldn't add a lot of shredded paper. I keep it balanced, and you'll know when it's out of balance because it will smell, it will be soggy, or it may be just too dry, So it's just being aware of your mixing and how much you're mixing. If you have too much of something, maybe you have to start another compost or put this somewhere else until your compost pile is ready to take this in, So it's not just throwing things together, it's like it has to be a balance, just like the soil. The soil is balanced, has the right amount of this, the right amount of that, and that's what helps the plant grow. A farmer told me if you have too much nitrogen, especially with the tomatoes, you'll grow a lot of leaves and stuff, but you won't have tomatoes. So he said, think like that. It's got to be a balance. And certain things are more balanced for whatever you're growing. You might need more nitrogen for some things and maybe less for others.
Yeah.
So I see you answering, Charmaine. Somebody was asking, Sabrina was asking about using wood ashes from the fireplace in compost. And you said you do use wood ashes. Will you talk a little bit about that?
So because we had all this dry shrub from last year that we usually at the end of the season, someone will, city will come and pick up all dry material, but that didn't happen this year. So we actually burned it in a chimney. And once that burned, we sprayed it around the plants because it's like slash and burn. In the Caribbean, before they plant, the garden, they will burn the vegetation so that, the ashes will actually contribute to the minerals that is going to the plant, depending on what they are planting. So it's the same thing as, using the wood, the ashes from the fireplace to add to your plant. It actually adds, nutrients to the plant.
Yeah, I know that some people use wood ash in particular when they're planting peas, that is a really helpful additive to it. But you were saying, Charmaine, don't use your barbecue pit.
I would suggest using because you know that coals to me, I mean some of the coals are treated. So
Mhm.
and even though you're
Yeah.
barbecuing, to me most of the coals that they sell in the bag is treated unless it's wood, actually. And it it's not good for composting as far as I consider. I don't eat meat, so anything that has, you know, a meat derivative, I'm kind of
Leave it out.
yeah, I keep it out of
But
it.
the wood ash, yeah, provides that potassium that really helps with all the things that, yeah, potassium is good for in the soil. So definitely adding it to compost, or even, were you saying you just put it right in the beds, right? Like as a,
Yeah, I put it right in the bed to spread it around the perennials.
um, so let's see, we were gonna talk, I think we've kind of covered all of our, let me see if I had one more slide here. Oh, I just want to show, I love this slide with these pictures of all the critters that are in a compost pile. Can you guys see this? It's a diagram that we use a lot when we're teaching kids about what's in our worm bin, and then what's in our outdoor compost pile. And we're showing, like, you're starting with the stuff that's here, these organic, whoops, misbehaving slides, these organic matter that we're putting into the compost, and then those things start getting broken down by molds and bacteria and all these invisible things. But then we're looking for some of the larger scale things like the earthworms and millipedes and sow bugs. Those are the things that we usually find, that we get to look at, and we talk about that the FBI is at work, the fungi, bacteria, and invertebrates. So these are all my favorite FBI agents in the compost pile here. And oh, I know Charmaine. Whoa, how did I started.
You were saying something, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm echoing again. Myself. That you use fish emulsion.
Yes, I do. And it's really affordable. You can get it at Walmart, you know. Walmart is quite convenient when you don't want to go shopping. I mean, and the great thing about, for me, I buy anything that's plant related at the end of the season. So I buy pots at the end of the season. I buy all my fertilizers at the end of the season. That's when you, unless you have space, I have a garage, so I store most of those stuff. But I buy everything at end of season when it goes on sale. So I always have a supply, you know, of fertilizers or pots that I decorate the garden with.
So can you say a quick word, Kevin? Do you apply fertilizers to your garden? Do you?
Not often. We did apply some molasses to our trees, our fruit trees. But we use a chop and drop method, like with nettle, comfrey. Comfrey is all over the garden. Once you get it established, you'll never get rid of it. So it's loaded with nutrients. It's healthy for you, and it's also healthy for the garden. So we chop and drop that. Any of the comfrey left over from my wife processing it, we throw it in my compost bin in the backyard because it's very healthy, and it makes a good like compost tea. But compost tea is very smelly, so we did it once and we stay away from it now. We just chop and drop and let the rain wash it into the soil.
And Charmaine, besides fish emulsion, I'm sorry, I might have missed it, but
no, I used blood meal actually this year because I was concerned about, I didn't have enough compost built up to use in the beds, even though I used compost soil to you know, enhance the beds. So I used blood meal in order to boost the soil, and it's really good. The greens overnight, they just like blossomed and get really big. My seedlings were small because we planted too much. So it was a complete change. And this is why we have so much vegetation right now in the garden. So
Yeah,
it really
I
helps.
saw your Swiss chard going crazy.
It is going crazy. You guys are welcome to come and get some.
Great. Yeah. Well, yeah, I find that I definitely need to feed at the beginning of the season when I'm putting things in, like when I'm putting in seedlings or transplanting seedlings to get them established. And I use, yeah, a variety of different organic fertilizers in addition to composting. That's I use both, but usually then I forget by once the season starts going, I'm no longer adding fertilizer unless I notice that something's really lagging, missing something later on. And that was a good point, Kevin, when you were talking about that that certain components of most fertilizers like nitrogen is not beneficial to add too much nitrogen if you're trying to produce fruit. Like if you're trying to grow tomatoes, you're going to get a lot of leaves and not the fruiting, that you're really interested in. So having the right balance there, whether you're adding fertilizer or just depending on what your compost mix is. Here's a question somebody had. Let's see. I see you're answering it, Charmaine. So somebody was asking, are there bugs you don't want to find in your compost pile? And Charmaine, you were talking about black flies.
Yeah.
And when do you
We
feel
didn't
like that is?
rotate the bin enough. And because of the rotation to circulate the air, the eggs kept being laid. And now I have semi-infestation in the black flies. So I'm going to add some sawdust. Actually tomorrow I'm picking up the sawdust so I can add to it so it can absorb, the compost pile. And that's really important to have that balance.
Yeah. So we've kind of dug all through the soil, and we were going to talk a little bit about watering. And I can't remember who was really going to touch on watering. Either you guys can jump in to talk about. I know I was going to talk about sheens on the soil because I just learned that this year. But who would like to jump in with talking about kind of knowing when to water and how much to water?
Well, and it may vary again from what you're watering. I can say like stinging nettle, they like a lot of water. Another one that likes the water is celery. So if you have celery, you're going to do quite a bit of watering. So watering, let's look at where we're getting our water from first. If you have a large space, you may not want to use your tap water because it's on the meter. If it's not on the meter and you're using well water, okay, all well and good. But try to use a harvesting system that can harvest the rainwater. Being that we're in the city and we're fortunate, we're right next to a house. I just asked my neighbor, could I tap into his downspout? And so we did that. And from that downspout, we fill up about, I think close to 1,300 gallons of water in 5 separate tanks. So they feed that. So, but actually it's been so hot lately and it hasn't really rained in several days. So we're sweating a little bit, but fortunate I can tap into house water, so city water, but it's at a cost. But I feel that the rainwater does it a lot better. And you really like 90-degree days, it's always better to water at night, because if you water in the daytime, and definitely don't water at noontime unless you're putting it directly into the soil. But we have so much foliage at this time that it's kind of difficult. So my wife is outside watering now. She's watering now. Or I'll go out early in the morning, like 6 a.m., and I'll water, because if you get some water on the leaf, it's possible the leaves can get burned if the sun comes out at noontime and they still have that moisture or droplets on the leaf. it can burn the leaf, or you can get a mold or a fungus just because of the water sitting on there and the heat hitting it. So, and then the amount of water, again, it depends, but the soil should be moist. If you take your finger and you stick it in up to the first knuckle, this right here, the first joint, it should be moist. It should be damp. If it's not, then you need some water. And I would worry about overwatering in a pot or a container, but in soil in the ground, well-drained soil, I wouldn't worry about it, because we go out there and we hose it down, and we hose it down a lot till you start to see puddles. But if you go away for a couple of minutes and come back, that puddle is gone. And a lot of times, if you stick your finger down in there, it's dry.
It's really
That's
dry. That's the problem I'm having.
Yeah, and that's another thing about soil. Good soil will hold a lot of water. So you want to give it a good soaking. And then what you do is still, you call it a good soaking, that's just keeping it satisfied until it rains. Because the amount of rain, when it rains, that's a good soaking of the soil. And it's a steady soaking. Like if it rains for a couple hours or overnight, it rains throughout the night, that's good. And you'll see a big difference in the daytime immediately. When it rains like that, your plants will be like, oh wow, they like grew another 2 inches or 3 inches, and they expanded. They're looking very healthy. But now is a challenging time because it's hot and it's dry, and we haven't had rain for a while. So we use what's in the tank sparingly. We kind of like figure out which crops are more drought tolerant, like okra can do without all edible weeds that they're self-sustaining. And this is one thing I realized, sunflowers and a lot of tubers, they'll manage themselves. I'm talking about the turmeric, ginger, horseradish, potatoes.
Sunchokes.
Huh?
Sunchokes.
Yeah, sunchucks. Forget it. They do their thing. I've seen sunflowers grow out of wood chips, and transplanted sunflowers that were like 1.5 to 2 feet tall, and just recently and had been broken in the middle, but like because of maybe the shock, but after a couple of days, they healed themselves and all that fiber, and they stand back up. We did a couple at the school next door to us. Me and Shannon from the Newark Conservancy planted some sunflowers, and a few of them were broken. But we looked at them, they healed. They grew like this tough thing around the part where they were broken, and they're starting to stand back up again.
Yeah, I saw the same thing happen last year with my garden.
Mm-hmm. Some things are very drought tolerant. So realize what's drought tolerant, and don't water them when water gets scarce. Cut them off a little bit, and then tomatoes. I know tomatoes love water. Give them a little bit water. Give them the water that you're taking from the other plants.
Serving from your okra. And
cucumbers, they love water. The cucumbers, and if you don't water cucumbers enough, they tend to turn out bitter. Yeah. In the long run, at the end of harvest. So, And
that's the thing. When you're growing something, you need to consider how much water. Like people will say, watermelons, they take up a lot of space, and they drink a lot of water. So if you're going through a time like this and you have watermelons, you're going to be sweating if you don't have access to
water supply.
A water supply. You're going to be sweating. Thank you. Yeah.
So for me, the way that I have water in the garden, we have like 6 250-gallon tanks, and the fire services actually facilitates us with refilling those tanks weekly. Usually it used to be twice a week, but it's been so hot, we finish a tank a day. And because we use the holes, I have drip irrigation in the beds. but the irrigation that I used was the soak hole, and the pressure that I had from the tank to go to the beds wasn't sufficient. So I was actually losing all the water in one bed and not going to, the consistent rows. So I just started watering again with the water hose, and we tend to water in the morning instead of the afternoon, because the last couple of years also I noticed that when we water in the afternoon, I had a lot of powder mildew, and I thought it was the soil, and not knowing it was actually watering in the afternoon, and the water staying on the leaves of the cucumbers and all the other crops.
So
that was a challenge.
yeah. So the time of day really makes a big difference. And I think all those things you were commenting, both of you were commenting about water conservation are really important. I think it's often people, if they're either not growing in the city or they're not growing in a place, they just don't even think about those kind of questions. And I know a lot of our school gardens were operating without any tap hookup, so it's like, okay, this is the amount of water we have, we've got to conserve it, we've got to use it carefully. But for people who are whatever, maybe have the good fortune to have access to plenty of water, or who are thinking about just like what's the optimal amount of water. I think, Kevin, what you were saying about that you want the soil to be mostly moist, when I work with kids, usually they kind of think like, if you've sprinkled it so that the soil went from being light colored to dark colored, you've watered. And that's not just kids, that's anybody.
Yeah.
And so this is a little, I put up on the screen here this image. This is NOFA, New Jersey. The Organic Farmers Association has this great little series of videos on different growing things. And Al Johnson, who's the guy up in the corner there, is an old-time organic farmer or organic grower. And he talked about putting sheens on the water so that when you water and you see like the water sitting on the surface of the soil, right? You watered it enough so that there's a sheen of water on top. It hasn't totally infiltrated. And he was saying, do that once, let it infiltrate, and then dig down in the soil and see how deep it got, how far that got into the soil. And it depends on the time of year and the type of soil you have. And he was saying most soils require 3 to 7 sheens. So you water it once to get that water on top, let it infiltrate, go down the row, come back, do it again, because you really want 6 inches deep to be moist. Otherwise, you're just training your plants to have very shallow roots, and that's not healthy, right? Not good to support themselves. So that was a new thing I learned this year in reviewing all these videos. I thought that was cool. Charmaine, do you want to talk a little bit more about the automatic or the drip irrigation system? Can you say anything about what that was like to set that up, or why you did that?
Me too.
Sorry, I'm muted. The main reason I put the drip irrigation, because it's just a challenge watering, and sometimes because I choose to water early in the morning before I will commute to work, I felt it was time consuming using a hose. And also, with the drip irrigation, once I have the solar panels installed at the garden, I could set up a system to have it automatically feed into the garden at the same time. So this is a really great cost saving opportunity for me. Time consuming, it's going to be great. And, in the long run, the beds, it's healthier for the watering to be done on the soil versus, spraying the foliage, so because I've noticed that once we use the hose, the pressure is so hard that it actually damages the leaves of the plant. It's kind of just like strip the plant so it weakens the leaves. And, that's a concern for us.
How much time do you spend watering? Would you spend watering with a hose?
Between my garden part, it's about an hour.
Yeah, I'm like an hour to actually 2 hours, and
Your
that's like,
space is much
and
bigger
I'm
than
probably
mine.
not, and I'm not probably doing the seven sheens, you know, at least not Martin. Okay, yeah, so it's time consuming, yes.
It's very
So
time consuming.
it's the other systems. If you're doing that amount of space, or you just have that time, hey, it's okay. But if you press for time, you need to look at other methods of doing it. And there's so many methods out there. See
Yes.
what works for you, and then go for it.
Yep.
So I want to make sure we get there. I see, Charmaine, that you were answering a question that somebody had about collecting rainwater and how long you can keep the water before using it. And I have definitely heard different things about that. Like Rutgers, when they were helping to set up rain barrels at some of our school gardens, were saying you had to use it within a week.
Oh,
But
really?
yeah, and I'm not totally sure why. I don't know if that's because there's a concern about like pathogens in the water, that it would build up, bacteria or something like that. But I, like you, have also used much older water.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to say though what you do, or what's your practice in that?
To me, water is water. I mean, we go through so much water um, in a week that there's no, you can't really save it. For me, I have a rain barrel at the side of my house, and it had water for months, and I only emptied it about the beginning of this month. And to me, it was fine. My plants look absolutely fine with it. To me, it's more nutritious.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I store it for as long as I can till it's time to use it. The one in the backyard, I have a 270-gallon tank in the backyard on blacktop, and I have a box next to it, and I actually wash the cars in the water. I wash the cars. I do things that need to be clean with that water too, because again, why should I use tap water to wash the tires on my car or to clean the bike? It's clean water. If you put a screen on it to keep the leaves out, it's clean. It comes in clean. We feed the cats with it, and that's probably healthier than feeding them the tap water.
Yep.
So I'm trying to see if there are any questions that haven't been answered, or just want to leave the opportunity. We are actually past time, but we started a little bit late, to see if anybody, if there are any other questions that people have, either about things oh wait, somebody asked a question way at the beginning. So if Sabrina is still on, she was asking about growing basil in pots, and she says there's something green on her dirt. Looks like it could be moss, but the basil is growing well, but it just looks icky. Anybody got any thoughts about
Most likely she's overwatering.
And then maybe because she's overwatering. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's too much moisture in her house.
Yeah. Is it indoor, outdoor, or?
I don't know. I don't know if you're. Let's see if we can see a note from Sabrina.
And she said it's looking icky. She's not saying the basil is looking icky.
The soil,
algae,
green stuff on the soil. Yeah, it could be algae on the soil, and it could have been maybe because of whatever the soil source was to begin with, right? That then it. That then, if it's got too much water, it's allowing it to grow.
Yeah, it's not draining. Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, we are over time. So since I have my my phone set up here and I talked about earth boxes, can I show off my earth boxes really quick?
Please do.
Please.
Okay, let me see. I got to turn my video on here and make sure that this can work here. Okay, let me mute up here.
Sabrina said her basil tastes good and it's outside. I think it's an algae buildup.
Yeah, yeah. But the basil looks good.
Huh, that's all that
Yeah.
matters.
If it looks good, yeah. And basils like tomatoes, so that's a good companion planting. You're doing that. Who's doing that?
That's her back feed from our laptop and her phone, Sarah's.
Okay.
Okay.
We're seeing if we can take a quick look around the garden here to show things. So, hey, we were talking about using the rain barrel. So here's my rain barrel. It's actually not hooked up right now, but there, yes.
I'm not seeing your video. I'm not too sure if it's showing.
What?
I'm seeing my.
Oh, you're not seeing my video?
I'm seeing the
No.
rain barrel. I'm
Kevin,
seeing
you
it.
see-
Yeah, I see you walking around. Is that a video? You walk.
Yeah, do you see my fig plant right now? Okay. So maybe it's just, oh, maybe I'm sorry. I know what I need to do. Let's do this. Maybe we're gonna have to quit that. Okay, it's a little too fancy. We're just not being successful with that. I will have to try another time to do. I thought we would actually be able to do a walk around the garden. Let's see, one last try. No. All right, well, we will have to do another visit to the earth boxes on another day. And I'm gonna hopefully do a video that I'll put up separately from this on how to make your own earth box using like just a plastic bin. But we have a few thank yous popping up, and I'm so glad that we have people continuing to tune in. On our next session, we're gonna be talking about pests. I can tell you as a little preview on that, I've been picking green caterpillars off of my kale all afternoon. So we're going to learn about what you guys do to deal with pests in the garden, and that may take up our whole session. But if we have time, we'll also talk a little bit about growing in other seasons, like growing a season extension into the fall, because even though we've just hit summer, we're already thinking about fall, I think. So thank you everybody for joining us for our third session of Know It and Grow It. Thank you, Kevin, and thank you.
You're welcome.
I am going to make sure that we put the contact information for your sites. Hey, Kevin, I heard, actually, let's do this real quick, that you're doing some kind of event at Rabbit Hole or a fundraiser. This is your opportunity to promote it.
Okay, well, we're still continuing the cob workshop. So we have a cob workshop. If anybody's interested, it's for the next couple of Thursdays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon, and we feed you very well. We'll have a vegan meal, lunch, and that's for the next couple of Thursdays. Wear shorts and leave the socks at home. And the way this weather has been, Men can come bareback or wherever.
Do you dance
Um,
in mud?
And we've also been doing thermoscales or sweat lodges, which is very interesting. You could YouTube thermoscales, but it's very healing, and it's a physical, mental, and spiritual cleanse, you know, in a Native American tradition. So we do those on an ongoing basis. It seems like we're having another one this weekend and another one in the next 2 weeks, and you know, so it's well needed in this area. It's tough, boy. It's hot inside there.
I heard.
The one, it's, you know, it's like, but it's not about surviving it. It's just doing what you can do, and let the heat heal you, and what goes on, the conversation that goes on in there, let that heal you. So it's a healing spot where you can feel safe to open your heart up and share what's on your mind.
Nice. Thank you.
That's great.
So that's good. And anybody can call me up if they're interested in having one or attending one.
Okay, so we'll make sure that with this video, we're gonna put the link information for your Facebook page, for Giving One Time's Facebook page, and we will see people here next Tuesday at 7 p.m.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Peace.
Great. Thank you.